There's a few ways that the art form can progress or can change and evolve. One is new creations, and the other one of the most important ones, is new artists doing things that we've done for a century in new ways. And we've seen those jumps, the Nureyev jump, the Baryshnikov jump, the Sylvie Guillen jump, the Maya Plisetskaya, Nijinsky, like all these individuals that did things that had been done before a million times, but they did it in such a specific way of their own that they opened the art form again. And so that's what I tell my dancers. It's like, great. Now that you know you can do it, you need to start to think about what do you want to do with it.
Welcome to the Grace and Form podcast, your backstage pass to the world of movement and the people and stories that shape it. Welcome to our first episode of 2026. Woo woo! We are currently not in a new year recording this episode, but we are very excited to know that this is going to time travel and our voices will land in 2026. How does that land with you, Indy?
Well, it lands very well, I would say, Sassy, because our guest is absolutely unbelievable. I was just enchanted, in awe, in inspiration, in excited to live life from hearing our conversation with her and living it, obviously, and then hearing it back. It's been just an incredible episode, and I feel like it's the perfect thing to hear into the new year, to get a little bit of inspiration in all areas of your life, I'd say, a little bit of tips, some extra knowledge here and there, some advice. It just was a very well-rounded, wonderful podcast that's just perfect for the new year, really.
Before we get into introducing our guest who really needs no introduction, Indy and I are going to put to the side our recommendations this week and instead talk about things that we want to crowd in this new year, with the intention to have a really wonderful 2026. So, Indy, are there a few things that you want to do more of this year?
Absolutely. Personally, I would like to channel a bit more bravery and courage, which this podcast episode has actually helped me channel even more, as well as trying to find ways to just be even more present. And I guess trying to find ways seems like a weird thing to say, to be present, because I'm still trying, but I would like to try to breathe and be more in my body in every facet of my life, on stage, off stage, taking the train, walking, and all of these things. So those are the two personal things. And other than that, what I'd really love to keep doing this year is taking time for myself, and taking a little break so that I can breathe, specifically with Sassy, and hopefully going on another journey adventure like we did in Australia. I think that was something that was super important for our mental health, as well as our friendship, as well as our livelihood, everything. Just taking a pause, sometimes from the work, from the hustle and bustle of life, and just taking some moment in nature. So those are the things I'm going to take with me in my new year.
I love that. I think our guest today really does talk about basically getting to know lots of things in the arts. And I think something that it inspired me to really think about that I want to crowd in more is just more exposure to different types of art and art forms and ways that they're integrating with different subjects that are topical of today, and just making a real point of going to see things that I wouldn't normally see to see if they move me. We talk every week basically about trying to do things that are a little different for you, the habits and the like the crossing your legs a different way, just reassessing the things that you like and don't like. So I'm really going to make an effort this new year to go and see different exhibits that I wouldn't typically, and just try to crowd in more things that I know I'll be interested and inspired by.
I'm going to do the same. That's
yeah.
also mine. I'm taking that inspiration right now. We're going to do that this year.
I think so. I think we should, once my mum got a present once, which was from her best friend, and it was for her 50th birthday. And every month she got a letter in the mail with an activity for them to do together. And I think it would be a really lovely thing, Indy. Why don't we, and we can do this with our readers or our listeners as well, why don't we once a month send out to this Grace Informed community something new to try and tick off the list to experience, whether it's virtual, something that you can find in your own city. I think we should do this together. I think it would be a lovely way to achieve that goal of just learning and being introduced to more things.
I love that. We're just going to try to be sponges all together as a community and soak in the arts, beauty of life, beauty of the world, and so much more in between.
Which leads us to tell you about our guest today. Today on the Grace Informed podcast, we are honoured to be joined by Tamara Rojo, one of the most influential figures in ballet of our time. Tamara's career spans extraordinary success as a principal dancer and groundbreaking leadership as an artistic director who has challenged long-standing norms around body image, power, and representation in ballet. I personally have been so inspired by Tamara, and so many things that she said to me personally have really changed my mindset around ballet and my trajectory in my own training and career. So it's been a real pleasure to sit down with her now as artistic director at San Francisco Ballet and talk about all the different stages of her career that has led her to be the leader she is today. We are so excited to get into this conversation. You're going to be so inspired by it because she truly is incredibly inspiring. Let's get into it. This podcast is an extension of our app, Grace Informed, where we bring ballet classes and ballet-inspired movement practices to you from beginner to pro, so everybody and everybody can experience our love of dance in their own home.
Absolutely, and we want to share everything that makes us feel amazing with you, and you don't even need a studio, and that's what's so wonderful about it. You can feel good anywhere.
So download the app, get a 7-day free trial, come move with me and Indy and some of our wonderful guests and incredible teachers.
We can't wait to see you.
Tamara, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You made such a huge impact on me in my life. Just to share a little anecdote that I've shared with Indy, because it really was such a kind of crossroads for me. I met you when I was 12 because my parents had won an auction at, I think it was a charity gala. And I spent the day with you. And at that time, I was a lost young ballerina who had, was homeschooled. I was very lonely. I felt like very separated from all of my friends that I had grown up with and peers. And I remember during this day when you were chatting to me and you were telling me about your childhood, and definitely correct me if I am misremembering, but I remember you said to me that the hard work I was putting off would pay off, and that the people in your life that you had related to that same feeling of being on the outside, and that some of the people that were really mean to you as a kid actually were the first ones sliding into your Facebook DMs and, wishing and congratulating you. And I remember sitting with that and thinking, okay, I'll push on. It's going to be okay. And this hard work means something. And it kept me going. And just thinking about that when we were thinking about coming to speak to you, I wanted to ask what you remember about your childhood and if you had to sacrifice anything to become a ballerina.
I really struggle with that context of sacrifice. I think we all make choices in life. And I think ballet demands a lot of time and dedication. Is a trade. It's not something you can somehow acquire without practice. And so that demands time. And that demands time away from things that we associate with normal childhood, perhaps. But I'm not sure there is such a thing as normal childhood, like teenage things, like going out with friends. But in all honesty, I wasn't that interested in that. So it didn't feel like a sacrifice. It felt like a choice. Holidays, the same thing. I will go to summer camps everywhere that were specific for ballet. And yes, some of my friends will have what looked like more fun because they were going to the beach or they were going to, to spend time with family and friends. But I was happy in the studio. So again, it didn't feel like a sacrifice. It felt like I was exactly where I wanted to be. And so, of course, I mean, I'm an only child. I was naturally introverted. My parents, is the Spain cultural landscape and political landscape was very complicated, and my parents were very much part of that transition between a dictatorship and democracy. So I was always very much in an adult context, and sometimes that made me not quite understand some of my colleagues in school. Like, I almost never went to see children films. So, I always was taken with my parents to see very inappropriate films, honestly. And then I would go to school to try and share what I saw the day before, and they were all looking at me like I was crazy. So anyway, I didn't feel like I fitted there, and somehow ballet didn't ask any questions. I just had to be in the studio and practice and listen to the music and somehow get lost within me. And that was my freedom. And so things that sometimes feel like a negative in the moment you're living them, again, I didn't come from a family that knew anything about the art form or had any connections. My school was a small school in Madrid. Therefore, it wasn't, one of the established reputational ballet schools. All those things that at the time I felt were going to be a hindrance in my career allowed me to have an outsider's perspective once I became a ballerina. And I think a lot of the reasons why I was able to perform the way I wanted to perform, what I was able to move on into management and question things and question traditions respectfully, um, were because I was always a bit of an outsider. And I never felt I had to defend a truth. There's always so much in those particular schools, Paris Opera, Mariinsky, and I was lucky to perform with all those companies eventually. And they had such a strong belief in their own traditions and hierarchies and ways of doing things. And I never had to carry that load. I
Mm.
I was free to think, well, I understand that, and yet this is how I believe the art form should be performed, or how I want to be seen, or how I think this particular role can be questioned or um, represented. And so I many of those things, like for you, Saskia, that seemed at the time to be really hard, and that they were going to prevent you from achieving your dreams, ended up being the one thing that encouraged me to be myself.
Mm. And looking back to your training, as you mentioned, with the Victor Ulate School, where you were surrounded by dancers, you've since become leaders who have since become leaders in their own right, like my good friend Joaquin and Joaquin Deleuze and Gonzalo Garcia. Can you see in hindsight what was embedded in the training in the school that helped you all kind of get to this incredible place in the world?
I think one was discipline. It was a very disciplined environment. I mean, I remember more or less from age 12 until I was a professional at age 17, I did about a minimum of 6 hours of ballet class a day,
Wow.
just ballet class. And then we did repertoire, and then we did either contemporary or flamenco or other things. So it was often 9 hours a day of training, which I don't know that that's possible today, in all honesty,
Yeah.
anywhere. So there was a lot of discipline and dedication. Also, again, something that is particular to Spain is that because Spain was not in either of the world wars, so we were not in the First World War and we were not in the Second World War, that allowed Russian troops like the Belarus and also other migrants to establish themselves in Spain and open schools. And what happened is that this distilled a particular technique that also then had an influence from Cuba, because Spain and Cuba has a long relationship. That is a mixture of Bournonville technique, Vaganova technique, and French and Cuban technique. There's all this amazing kind of base. And so it's a very strong base that was particularly developed by the teacher of my teacher, which was Lola de Avila. And
Yes.
and so Lola de Avila, who then her daughter came actually to direct the San Francisco Ballet School too for many years, had an amazing ability to not only teach technique, but teach dancers how to analyze almost like physics, why the body moved or how do turns work. What is friction? What is dynamics? Where is resistance? And it was a very interesting amalgamation of three kind of different schools that produced dances that could also be very adaptable. Like we had so many different layers of technique that we could adapt to the British style, the French style, the American style, whatever it is that we wanted to pursue. So I think there was kind of things that just historically helped that, as well as Victor's huge dedication and demand for that discipline.
Yeah, you can really see it. I mean, you can see it. All of you guys went to all different companies, changed all different places. And when you think about your journey through Scottish Ballet, English National Ballet, and Royal Ballet, where do you feel you changed most as an artist and why?
I mean, the fastest change happened to me in Scottish Ballet, and it was very fast because it was only from December to May, and then Galina left, and I joined English National Ballet. And that's because up to that point, I hadn't really done classical ballet, classical repertoire in Spain. I had only done Giselle. Everything else was neoclassical. Victor had been a dancer of Maurice Véjart, and he was a
Oh,
choreographer. So his style was kind of neoclassical. And then he brought a lot of choreography by Hans van Manen and Rudy Van Dancing and Niels Christie. So we had like that Dutch school and the Véjart style of choreography, but we only did a little bit of balancing. We did Allegro Brillante, and we did Concerto Barroco, and theme variations, and then we did Giselle. That was the only thing that we had done in the
wow.
company. And then suddenly I joined Scottish Ballet, and in 6 months I did Nutcracker for the first time, Swan Lake for the first time, La Sylphide for the first time, and John Cranko, Romeo and Juliet.
My goodness.
And so suddenly my understanding of what classical meant and the range of repertoire was awakened. And because it was a smaller company and it was a slightly outside of the spotlight of, centers like London, New York, I was able to just learn without any kind of fear or pressure. And I had a lot of great coaching while I was there. And so that was kind of the beginning of a journey. And then really London in general, English National Royal Ballet, but also having access to so much art, to so many exhibitions and plays. I became obsessed with the theater and other ballet companies coming through and just their general. I mean, I think London in the late 90s, early 20s was the cultural capital of the world. It was an explosion of creativity. And again, that fed a different perspective about where our art form sat in this ecology and what
Yeah.
were the good things and what were the challenges that we needed to look into.
Yeah, I feel like it's always so important to be a sponge in your person, to be able to go all over, see all different types of art to really help you grow, not only as, this single individual dancer in a company, but also as an artist, so that you can bring those things to the ballet. I mean, it must have been what an incredible exposure to so many classical and neoclassical and everything, and being able to really take it on in a smaller company, like you say, is such a cool thing. I feel for me, I always enjoy doing gigs because it's a similar feeling. I've done a lot of debuts on gigs, and I have to say I've enjoyed it so much because, one, it's usually a challenging stage because maybe it's extremely raked or it's super slippery, black box, but then two, it's, a wonderful crowd usually, and then you get to do it back at home and you've been able to learn and grow in it before going there. It's pretty special to do that. Do you feel like, does it make a career richer going into different companies and having those experiences versus staying in the same company? Do you have I know that's your experience, but what is your opinion on that?
I mean, for me, my experience was like yours in that whenever I was able to go outside of the company that I was part of, whichever that was, I learned something new about a new style. Like again, doing Swan Lake in Russia, doing Swan Lake in China, doing Swan Lake in Cuba is a completely different experience. And
Totally.
but also it was the experience of the absolute truth they hold to, you go there with your version and they're like, no, but this is the version. And,
Yeah.
that was very revealing to me because I was like, right, again, I'm not precious. So I'm going to absorb as much as I can of your style. And, while also being true to who I am and what I can do with it. But it was such an amazing journey of learned. And it was also very
Yeah.
liberating as well,
Yeah.
in that in that way of doing the same thing in so many different ways. So I love that. At the same time, I remember talking about this with Carlos Acosta because Carlos, for many years, he was my partner, but he was a freelancer. And I remember
Mm.
he saying, Tamara, just become a freelancer. You don't have to belong to one company. You could be all over the world. And I knew that for me, that wouldn't work emotionally. I needed to feel I had a home to come back to. And I needed to train a lot. I didn't have an easy body. And so having continuous good quality access to training was important to me. So to have a base from which I could have those other experiences was good to me. But that doesn't mean that that fits everybody,
Yeah.
People need different things. And for him, being a freelancer and traveling, and that's what he liked. So,
Yeah,
you
of
have to
course.
know yourself.
And see what you need. I'm curious, what kind of training did you do on the side? Did you do any like Pilates or speaking from experience, you can ask Sassy, I do everything because I also have a
You're a
really
pick and mix girl.
yeah. Lovely. I love my body, but it's definitely, I have to do Pilates. I have to stretch a lot. I do gyrotonics every day so that I'm lengthening and have, very loose joints, but strong as well, and swim and eat well and all the things, sleep, take magnesium, everything you need to do is like an all round thing. Did you have any things, that you really leaned on?
I did Pilates for many, many years with a wonderful man that's still around. He was one of the original dancers of Rambert when Rambert started being a classical company alongside English National Ballet, which was London Festival Ballet and the Royal Ballet. And Rambert, remember, was the assistant of Nijinsky during the creation of Rite of Spring. So we're talking about amazing people. His name was Andreas Reinicke, and he was kind of the Pilates instructor of the ballet dancers. Ed Watson and I used to go very early morning. Um, and then there was a point where that didn't work for me anymore. I did try gyrotonics and that it also didn't work for me. And then I started strength training, like weight. And that for me, after my 30s, was a lifesaver. That changed everything in terms of my resilience, my especially elevation. I didn't have an easy jump, but even my flexibility. So training range of movement with weight training and resistance actually helped me a lot as well to keep my range of movement.
It's so cool how like each body, even within your own lifetime, you change, and to be okay with, you know, of course we have a routine
Mhm.
and some people are really like attached to that routine. I know every once in a while I am, but Sassy and I do the exercise where we walk on the other side of the street if we walk on this side all the time to change it up, And I feel like it's such a good thing. I'm just putting it forward to our listeners too, because I feel like being okay with changing your regiment, and maybe Pilates doesn't work for you anymore and you go to, for example, strength training. I did the opposite. I did strength training and then I was seeing it was making my joints a little bit stiff.
Mhm.
And so then I went to the gyrotonics journey, but it's cool because every phase of your life, just you keep growing,
Yeah. And your body changes, is an instrument that changes. so
Yeah.
so you can't just keep feeding it the same thing, because it's not the same body all the time. And motherhood changes that, and menopause changes that, and there's so many
Yeah.
things you have to deal with. So yeah, it depends at what point in your career you are, what kind of training you need, and also what repertoire you're about to do. It's not the same to do
Hmm.
Vaya there than to do Mats at Carmen. It's a different type of dynamic. So what are you training for specifically? That also is important.
Totally.
We pulled a bunch of quotes when Indy and I were looking at all the different things, Tamara, that has been written about you, or that you've said, and maybe it's been in context or out of context. And we found so many so interesting, and also um, just in terms of experience, things that we can both really resonate to. Starting with things that people have said about you, which I certainly can relate to, having been in the audience of many of your shows. The Guardian once said, "With most dancers, you take away shapes and steps. With Tamara, it's pure emotion. She makes an arabesque or pirouette sing with meaning." I was interested reading that because I know that so many people listening, or maybe at the start of their journey in a professional company, are trying to focus on perhaps what sets them apart. Do you know when you maybe realized that that was something that audiences really experienced through your dancing, that emotion, that you were delivering that to people that you were performing for?
I don't think I ever was that self-aware, and I also don't think I set out um, early enough. Actually, I wish I had, to set myself apart. I thought that I had to do the things I was told a ballerina should do in the ways that I was told they should do it for a very, very long time. And if anything, looking back, I wish I was braver. I always admire ballerinas that took creative risks. And I think I was a little bit compliant for a very, very long time. Um, in terms of of what the audience took, in all honesty, I like to hide in plain sight, if I can say that. Like it was obviously me performing, but I love becoming somebody else. That was one of the best things about being a dancer, an artist for me, was becoming this, the most outrageous, the better, the most outrageous characters that could be the most distant from my normal behavior. Like I adore Mary Bethsera. I love Carmen, really outrageous women that will do whatever they wanted, no questions asked. I love those characters, Black Swan, blah, blah, blah. And so it just wasn't something I did to get a reaction out of anybody. It was something I did because it was my only way of doing it, if that makes sense. I didn't know how
Yeah.
to do it any other way. And I did struggle for a very long time performing things that didn't have a story. Like for me, that was very scary, very exposing, to just be out there as myself. I really didn't like it until I discovered that even in those things, like emeralds, actually, emeralds was a very interesting process for me, because at the beginning I didn't understand it, and I was like, oh my god, like this is not me. Like I don't do that. Like I'm not like
Did you
that.
do this one?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I was like, how am I gonna go on stage? And then I thought, well, I could pretend to be French. I could pretend to be one of my French ballerina friends. I know
It's
exactly how
perfect.
they would do that. They would feel so absolutely wonderful on there, and that's what I did. I became one of my friends that I admire, and I perform as if I was her for a day. And so I
Totally.
needed even that, even in things that didn't have a clear narrative. I needed something to hold that, because otherwise I felt, for me, movement, steps are words. And so otherwise I felt that I was just giving a monologue of nothingness. And so, yeah, I always used some storyline for myself.
I'm like that too.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. I read a little bit about it, and I'm so interested to know the process of getting into a character in that way, because I'm surrounded in my life, particularly having just lived a long stint in LA, with lots of actors that have different ways of getting into a role. And I think it's so interesting hearing this from a dancer, because of course it makes all the sense. You're almost doing you're doing less, which is doing even more because there's no words coming out. But what is your process when you were taking on a role and getting into it almost, like a method actor?
I think I had two processes. When I was very young, like the first time I did Rite of Spring, I kind of used a bit of method, and I used a very sad moment in my life to get into the character um, of the woman that is sacrificed in the Rite of Spring. And after a while of doing that every day before going on stage, I realized that I wasn't feeling sad anymore about something that was personal, that was very sad. And I understood that that process was actually removing my my real feelings from myself. Like I was abusing my feelings and my real life in order to gain an emotion on the stage. And I decided I
Wow.
didn't want to do that. Like I needed to feel sad about something that was sad in my real life. I couldn't just wear it out. And so, like I said, I was part of the theater community in London anyway. And the British kind of approach to acting is act. It's not method, it is technique. And so, research the character, learn about it, read as much as you can about it, acquire all the knowledge about the period or whatever it is, and then filter it through you, and then just do it and try not to abuse yourself in the process. And so that shifted. And it usually started when I started putting makeup on. I like doing my own makeup. I took forever. Like I will arrive to the theater 4 hours before the show, and I was just really methodical. And, I will take an
Amazing.
hour and a half just to do. I just didn't want to be rushed. And so that process of, quietly being in the dressing room, putting makeup on, doing my hair or getting my hair done, depending of how difficult that was, and just slowly getting into costume, slowly getting into the character. And then, you go on the stage and you're ready. But I also did practice in the studio. I was always shameless. I didn't care if there was 200 people in that studio, if there were donors, if there was press. I was going to perform my character because I needed to practice the character and I needed feedback about whether the direction I was going was working. And so I was always full on with feeling on the theater, on the studio too. I was like, okay, now I'm Mary, and here we go. And sometimes that was uncomfortable because it was really close up, some things. But I didn't care. I was able to just lock that out and just go, well, I need to practice my physical performance and my emotional resilience. I need to know that I can hold this character and this journey. And so I did that too, in order to just practice the performance itself.
I feel personally, when I first got to do Romeo and Juliet, I remember I was in the studio, or La Valse, Balanchine's La Valse, you have to act, and it's so fun. It's the most fun to act, and I love it so much. But yeah, in the studio, when I was younger, I was so nervous to do it. I go naturally very bright red when I'm a little shy or a little embarrassed or unsure, a little insecure. And so I would act, but it would be like I would feel the judgment. So my own judgment, nobody else's, just my own. And I would be like, oh, I don't know if I should do it. And I'm like seeing myself from the outside. And then after a while, you just like let it melt away, this, judgment that you have on yourself, and you dive into the character. And I can't say enough how much it's helped me on stage luckily I've discovered that 10 years ago.
Mhm.
So I could start doing more acting in the studio, because it's so helpful to start doing it in front of even people that are so close, where it can be a little intimidating, but it's where you can see if you can really hold the character, and then you go on stage and you explore even further because you've already done that beginning work. And it is a technique too, like to keep working that muscle.
The character should inform the steps.
Mm-hmm.
People speak with different ways regarding their character. You if you are a specific type of person, the way you speak, the way you interact with people verbally has an intention. And either you're
Totally.
aggressive or you're passive or you're shy, but that has to be translated to our steps, because those are our words. So the arabesque of the Black Swan is not the same as the arabesque of the white swan, because they're different people. It's the same step, but
Totally.
it's a different statement. Um,
Absolutely.
and so that's also what I try to now encourage in the dancers in the company, that from the very first rehearsal, when we're teaching you the steps themselves, keep in mind who this character is, because how you approach that steps should be informed by the intention of the character. Is this character attacking something? Is this character trying to get something? Or is this character in isolation, in an introspective solo moment? And how do we talk to ourselves when we're at home cooking dinner is very different than when we talk to other people, you know. So again, what is the mood that these steps should reflect?
I love that. I'm going to take that into my practice because it's such a important thing to put that intention just right from the beginning with the pinky.
Mhm.
You know, how you move your hand from walking on stage to exiting. You know, it's so crucial, and it's easy to let it go in the studio, but then you get on stage and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't even thought about this."
The
So it's
famous
a
walk for White Swan Solo is the most terrifying walk in human history. You know, like, it's just like, oh my God, everything is silent, and you're like, one, two,
you're like, "Here we go."
exactly, here we go to the way to the center of the stage. You know? So unless you practice, what is this walk? Why are you walking there? Suddenly, you've been hiding for like 20 minutes so far, and now you purposely take the center of the stage to do a monologue. Like, how does that work? How do
Totally.
you justify this? But you need to work on it. You can't just wait for the show and suddenly have
Yeah.
a panic attack about how you're going
Yeah.
to get to the center. You know?
You're like, "Oh my gosh, it's so quiet. I can't do this. I'm going to
Yes,
walk back out."
exactly. Yes.
Um, we have another quote that I'm curious about. So the quote is, "Very often we see relationships on the stage approached from a male perspective." When did you first become conscious of how gender shapes repertory and power in ballet?
It was at some point when I was at the Royal Ballet. And I was already thinking about what I wanted to do after. I started studying again. And somebody, I can't remember, somebody asked me, so what creations of women have you involved with? And I just looked back and I was like, well, none. I haven't really been in any creation in 20 years by a woman. And also I saw a few ballets about specific subjects like Carmen, um, that really made me feel very uncomfortable. Um, and then as I was growing and maturing, there were certain roles that I felt I was outgrowing, and that my perspective about women and myself um, quite didn't align. And I don't think that you should only perform things you agree with, because then you probably can perform almost anything. And we are there also not to judge the character. We're there to just present the character, and we all have reasons why we become who we become. So it's very also easy to be judgmental. But there were certain things about certain ballets that I was just, well, I think this is like this because it is done by a man. And so I started to reflect on that, and also, to reflect on, wait, like all these companies, the Royal Ballet, English National Ballet, Rambert, were created by women, and yet no women director happened for a very long time after that. How is that possible? How did we forget that actual leadership positions had traditionally been led by women? That, Australian ballet was created by a woman. Um, the National Ballet of Canada was, I think, created by a woman. So there were so many huge companies around the world that had started because a woman was, you know, decided to start a company there. And then very
Hmm.
quickly, that kind of got forgotten. And I was like, okay, so what happened there? Like, at what point did we decide that women couldn't be in leadership positions? So it was just a bit of a combination of, historic studies of our art form, and then some reflection on certain statements on the stage that being made, that made me think, what will happen if this was shared from a different perspective? It might not be better, but it might be different.
Totally. And once you had the authority to kind of shape a company now, and its programming, how intentional are you about changing what perspectives and whose perspectives were represented on the stage?
I think I've been quite intentional. I did, 2 programs solely dedicated by female choreographers before that was a thing, in English National Ballet. And I think that started a chain effect that has been very positive for the industry.
Yes, so good.
And here again, my first full length was commission of Ashton Barton. We had a new Carmen as well. And so I am quite intentional of having a variety of voices, including in the creative teams that we have, and who creates the score or who creates whatever the designs or the costumes. Just a little bit of variety, and not always rely on what we know is already successful.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important to have the variety. I think that's the point, is that we don't want to keep seeing just one defining perspective in our art form or in the world, really. It would be nice to see all different people, backgrounds, everything.
And
And
choreographers, very understandably feel safe relying on collaborators they've worked with for a long time. But that can also mean that every piece looks the same. And so
yes,
sometimes I just go to a choreographer and said, I understand that this is your team. Let's do 50-50. Let's give you 50% of comfort and support and 50% of new, so that we get
yeah.
something that is still yours, but is not exactly the same that you have done already.
This episode of the Grace Informed podcast is sponsored by a wonderful donor who wants to shine a light on some of the most impactful dance and art charities in the world. Today we're highlighting the National Dance Institute's Dream Project. At NDI, the belief is simple but powerful. Everyone can dance. It's a mission that's close to our heart. Indiana herself has performed numerous times at NDI with the incredible Daniel Ulbrich, who has a huge impact on this incredible institute. She's seen firsthand the incredible impact the work has on young dancers and their communities. If you'd like to support the Dream Project, you can donate at nationaldance.org. Every contribution helps keep the joy of dance accessible to every child.
I love that. And looking back across your career, with that being said, which has been marked by so much success, I wonder whether there have been moments you'd now approach differently, either as a dancer or as a director, in this position that you're in now, and how those experiences shape the way you lead today.
Oh, that's a very big question.
It's a big one, and I can repeat
Yes,
any
please
part.
repeat. I'm not sure I can grasp it. Yeah.
First part.
Yes, thank you.
The first part is whether you have moments, like looking back at your career, are there any moments you may have approached differently? Like as a dancer, I'd love to ask as a dancer first, and then maybe coming in as a director would be interesting to see.
I think as a dancer, as I said before, I wish I had been braver in fighting for my own voice. I think also I had a certain physicality that made me look a little bit like Margot Fontaine, and also because of my acting abilities, I was often given roles that she had done. And it was very often the case that I was told, Margot did it like this. And while my hair was dark and my skin was white, and we, both came from some kind of Latino background, um, the fact is that we were very different dancers, And so I felt a little bit tied down by this person, or the legacy of this person, not her, because when I later studied her, she was the kindest, most generous human. So I'm sure she would have been horrified to hear that she was used to pigeonhole other people in those roles. Um, so I wish I had been braver sooner in doing it the way that I felt that character needed to be done at that point in history and within my physicality and my abilities. So that's the one
Totally.
thing that I try now to encourage my artists to do. You know, yes, okay, first Swan Lake, let's take it, one step at a time. after you've done it 2, 3 times is the next conversation. It's like, okay, so since there's a few ways that the art form can progress or can change and evolve. One is new creations, and the other one of the most important ones, is new artists doing things that we've done for a century in new ways. And we've seen those jumps, you know, the Nureyev jump, the Baryshnikov jump, the Sylvie Guillen jump, the Maya Plisetskaya, you know, Nijinsky, like all these individuals that did things that had been done before a million times, but they did it in such a specific way of their own that they opened the art form again. And so that's what I tell my dancers. It's like, great. Now that you know you can do it, you need to start to think about what do you want to do with it? Who,
I love that.
what is your Swan Lake and what is it different to any other Swan Lake?
Today we were doing this interview at my company for the New York City Ballet bill, and I was telling Sassy about it. It was for Aurora and Sleeping Beauty because it's coming back in the winter, and I've had the honor to do it twice, 2 seasons, like one when I was a soloist and one when I was a principal, and it's so cool because every time it's different, and it's very special for that reason, because if you keep kind of chasing something different or understanding more or kind of coming more into your own, you can just have a whole different experience. And it was a cool interview because I was with Emma Von Enck, who's going to debut it, and myself, and we were talking to each other with another person, and it was so interesting to see where you are when you first start a role, like you say, with Swan Lake, and then where you can take it and should be and hopefully are encouraged. You know, we can encourage each other as well as colleagues too, to keep going further. And I really I admire that a lot because it's such an important thing.
I was going to touch on the bravery aspect of it because I think it's interesting, that word. And also I've seen you reference as well imposter syndrome, this thing that whatever profession we can be in can be a really debilitating wall in front of you when you feel like it's that thing of being brave enough to believe that you should be there. And it makes so much sense that you say that you found so much comfort in the different characters, and that when you were there with, you know, the non-story ballets, it was much more kind of revealing. Did that translate in terms of that feeling of imposter syndrome going from dancer to director? How did you manage that? Also, as a woman in a leadership role that is often male driven, as we were talking about.
Certainly. I mean, I had zero experience as a manager when I was given the role of artistic director of English National Ballet. Nothing, you know. But I did know the company very well. I had been a dancer of the company. I loved the original mission of the company, that was more aligned with my belief that art should be accessible to everyone, and that we as artists need to make it so, you know, by traveling, by finding our audiences, but also making it affordable by so many different ways in which an art form can and should be available to the majority of the people, especially in countries where it receives public subsidies. You know, you're literally being paid by the people. And so you have to ensure you are accessible to those people, to the whole, you know, the whole nation. And so I loved the company, and I felt very motivated by that original vision. But I did have no experience at all. I knew the theory, but not the practice. And I think what saved me was that I had an amazing chairman, Justin Bicol, who was a very young man too, very courageous man, who thought that I had enough conviction, passion, and vision to be trained. And he took me under his wing and he helped me become a director. He helped me become a manager. He believed in what I believed the company could be, and he enabled me to achieve that vision. And so, uh, in all honesty, I've also been very lucky in that I found people throughout my career that have supported me. And then, of course, I had Lloyd Araujo as my associate director. You know, that was the opposite end of experience. This woman had experienced it all, you know. So having someone of such wisdom and experience and kindness and global perspective as well. She had a huge career. She was Cuban, but she danced in the Bolshoi, and then she danced for Roland Petit and for Berard. And so she had this huge repertoire and this huge global perspective. So that was also very helpful. So I guess what the answer is, I surrounded myself with people that knew more than me. And I was happy and lucky to hear their wisdom and to learn from them.
Yeah. I remember when you stepped in and talking about kind of the coming in with conviction and also, I mean, you had the mission and you knew what you wanted to achieve. So I remember that being like a kind of a burst of light into the ballet scene, also because as like a young dancer at the time, I mean, I was probably 13, 14. So all your dreams are kind of there. You're hearing about how this company is going to evolve and change, and it's so exciting. And then at that same time, you moved in and you continued to dance as a principal. How was that decision? And did you weigh the risk of it? Did it feel like the right thing to do from the get-go?
I did think about it quite a lot. Um, at that time, the audiences of the company of English National Ballet were not the best. They just done a run of Manon, and the box office was only 20% of capacity, so it was in trouble. And of course, I had a following. I had audience. I could feel the theater. And so I thought that there will be a moment, a transition where for a few years I could dance and lead so that the audience will come back to the theater until the point where they would trust the company, they would trust the brand. And so then it wouldn't matter so much whether or not I was dancing, because they will come to anything we did, because hopefully by then they trusted that anything we did would be interesting, and of a certain quality. And that's exactly what I did. And then of course, I brought other great ballerinas to join me. And so that also helped me not having to dance as much, and certainly not having to do opening nights, which I didn't want to do ever. So having other people that I could like, yeah, this is yours, go for it. And slowly letting go of certain roles, and as the company progressed and more dancers joined and repertoire grew, then I could, slowly just walk away, which was a relief for me.
Did dancing alongside everybody, whether it be in class or in a show, did that change the way you got to know them and led them?
I think it did. I think especially in a company with such little resources like English National Ballet, and that is a touring company, when you are on the train and you are on those gigs and you're in the same hotels and you are in those cold theaters in, North UK, and you go through the same experiences, I think there is a share, there's a shared feeling. It's like, okay, I know this is hard and I'm doing it alongside of you, because this is what the company stands for and this is what we believe in. And, yes, we getting into a bus or getting into a train at 1 o'clock in the morning to get back to London after you've been performing 6 shows in 5 days. Does it feel great? No, it doesn't. It doesn't feel great for anybody, but here I am, because this is what we do. We bring ballet to the people. And so there was, I think, a camaraderie or an understanding. And of course, many of my colleagues had been colleagues of mine when I first joined, when I was 20, and they were still dancing in the company. So we had shared dressing rooms before. We had been. And there was no, like, when I first joined in Markova House, the original like studios, there was only one dressing room for all the principal ballerinas. So we were all together always. And so there was that kind of familiarity, of being in class, in rehearsals, in the dressing rooms, in the buses, in the trains, in the planes, in the hotels. Everything you're going through, I'm going through. There's no special treatment in terms of what we both experience.
Yeah. I There was one of the kind of the main things that I remember, at least in the press, that you came in with, and I'm going to tell a story to put it in context, just a personal one. I remember when I first met you, going back to when I was 12, I remember you suggested at the time that I trained with Vanessa Palmer, a soloist at Royal Ballet, which I went on to train with for many years. And after that, I went on to train with Jose Martin, and he was obviously at English National Ballet at the time too. So I'd see you in and out. And at that time, my dream was very firmly, I was probably 15, I want to dance at English National Ballet. I want to dance under Tamara's leadership. And at that age, I was in a really hard space because I wasn't eating. I was trying to look this kind of perfect, what in my head, what it would look, what would it take to look like a perfect dancer. And we think E&B must have been performing at a theatre in Covent Garden at the time, and I went in there to take class very early with Jose before everybody came. And I remember seeing you, and you said to me, you looked at me and you said, I don't want thin dancers, I want healthy dancers. And I remember hearing that as a 15-year-old. And at this time, you're not only, my idol because I've been looking at you dancing for years, you're also at the top of the, leadership at the company I dreamed to be with. And it made such a huge impression because my little teenage voice was all of a sudden like, to be where I want to be, I need to be healthy, And I'm so interested because this was something you spoke about in the press at the time as one of your missions. But why did taking that stance and talking about it matter so much to you?
First, I would like to say I'm so sorry you went through that. It's a very, very painful and very lonely experience. And it's one that I shared for many years. And I guess I always wanted, as a director, to give my dancers a better experience than the one I had in every aspect, of my career, whether that is their health, their nutrition, their psychological support, the medical standards of our teams, the repertoire, the tour, whatever it is. I always feel like the next generation deserves better, And so perhaps because I've shared that and I know how lonely and how consuming that is, what a waste of time and emotional energy and mental capacity it is, to focus on that. I did try to, from the very beginning, be very outspoken about I want healthy dancers. I want dancers that find love for themselves and their bodies, not because of what it looks like, but because what their bodies allows them to achieve. And it took me 2 decades to get there myself. And I didn't want that to be such a long journey for anybody else. So if that helped you at the time, I'm delighted. It's
Yeah.
great to hear that. But I do think we have a shared responsibility to break some of those perceptions. And the 90s were tough. The standards of the 90s, not just in ballet, but in fashion, were extremely difficult. And I fear that we're going back to that now with the whole Ozempic shape. And I saw again, talking about dancers as artists and athletes that need to have healthy bodies that are resilient and healthy minds that are resilient, so that we hopefully can protect them from the social pressures also and the social media pressures that we didn't even have, or at least I didn't even have. I can only imagine how difficult that is. So it's very important.
Yeah, I saw a video of you with it was probably a hammer knocking down a wall, creating a wellness center at San Francisco. And I was telling Indy because after my training in dance and after a lot of injuries were the thing that set me back, I got so interested in cross training and food, and my career journey went into writing cookbooks and developing, fitness plans. And one thing I always felt was just, why is there just not more investment in the dance world, even from a younger age too, education around it? But seeing walls literally being knocked down to create more resource is so cool and so exciting. And I suppose there's no question in that, just that it's a really cool thing that you're doing. And I also know that when you were at E&B, the different resource to be able to speak to people too was put there. What Obviously we know what fuels that, but what now at San Francisco, kind of coming from developing all these things in E&B, what are you building behind the knocked wall?
Well, this building is a little bit challenging in that it only has so much capacity, but thankfully we were able to expand the wellness center a little bit, but we've grown
Amazing.
the team. I think what is important is we've grown the team. So again, we give access to nutritionists. We also have like forums or nutritionist courses, especially before the season starts, to like how to sustain the season, how to fuel yourself when you have 2 shows a day. What is the appropriate process to ensure that you're properly fueled, between shows. And we have access to psychologists that the dancers can access completely in anonymity, that the management doesn't have access to. We have expanded our wellness center. And so the same commitment that I had at English National Ballet. And of course, there I was eventually able to build a new building, and it's one that had gyrotonics and Pilates floor, and then a strength and conditioning floor, and actually endless pool. Like, so you could swim if you couldn't walk yet. You could still swim against the current, or you could do point work inside the water to do the rehab of point work without the load of your weight. And so over there, we had like a state of the art. Over here, I live within the constraints of the building that we have, which is great. But in terms of access, perhaps sometimes it has to be outside of our own building, but having access to as much support as possible to prevent injury and then to come back from injury physically and mentally is something that I'm very committed to, and that we've already started to put in place.
It's so important, and it's such a incredible thing to implement in, all the companies around the world. But of course, the company that you're in now, it's like a very inspiring thing. We're just kind of starting that at New York City Ballet, and I'm part of the wellness committee, and other committees. So we've just implemented a cold plunge, which is amazing. But
Indy's
it's the
on
same.
all the committees. You're a committee girl.
Good for you.
It's hard though. It's hard to implement these things, especially in these cities. And, like you were saying, it's not government subsidized as well. So it's, it's just another tricky avenue. But I wanted to do one more quote over here.
I'm scared now. You've done a lot
No,
of
it's a short one. It's a short one.
Okay.
Everything that is creative is happening on the West Coast, is what you said. We are really very creative, very much risk takers. We're bringing the art of ballet forward. When you landed in San Francisco and joined SF Ballet as the artistic director, what were the risks you first wanted to take? And I'm also curious to know, with this generation of, TikTokers and all of these social medias, how do you feel like you can keep their attentions?
So I think, to be honest, I think all the answers are in the past, and that sounds counterintuitive when I'm talking about being innovative. But we've seen it before. We see
Yeah.
moments of stagnation of our art form, and there are a few ways in which you can reignite interest. One is new creations. So from the very beginning, I started to commission new works, but they have to be works that are relevant. They have to have a relevance to society or to the city or to dancers or to something. And so that's why the first work I commissioned was Mere Mortals, because we are, literally, we are in Silicon Valley. We are literally in Hayes Valley, which is where AI is being developed, mainly in the center of San Francisco. And so we needed to talk about it, and we needed to talk about the fears of the artist that are well-grounded, and we needed to talk about the dangers of that, reckless ambition. And so that's why we did Mere Mortals. And that in itself changed completely our audience. In that program alone, we had 10,000 new people to the ballet in just one program.
It's incredible.
And mainly they were students from Stanford, a student from Berkeley, people that were interested in new technology, people
And younger.
much younger, a
Amazing.
much younger generation. Like buses were coming from these universities, or from workers of Apple, workers from Google, like a completely new generation. And so then you have to keep that attention, like with the program we're doing at Forsyth, or we're bringing back Mere Mortals, or other things that we're doing. We're activating. It's also how you approach the performance itself. I think there's a before and after the pandemic. I think before the pandemic, people were okay with paying a ticket and just sitting down and and absorbing something. Now they want to be part of a unique event, something they can share with others, something they can experience. And so we changed the front of house. We have DJs either before or after. We had female mariachi bands for our Frida Kahlo program. We had DJs after the shows of Mere Mortals. We're going to have flamenco group before Don Q. Like, we're really committed for every moment that you spend interacting with us being one of experience, transformation, sharing, one that you can share on all those TikTok and social media, because those are just platforms for communication. So the more people engage in that way on our behalf, the better for us. So I think that's one of the ways in which you keep the art from evolving. And another way is about looking at the classical tradition with knowledge, with respect, and approaching it without fear. And I learned that in the UK, in that you have so many different versions of Hamlet, and nobody would dare say that there is one true version. And even the text is adapted. One of the most amazing versions of Othello was the one that Nick Heiner directed soon after 9/11. And he put Othello in the war in Iraq. And it changed everything. It changed suddenly it became a play about the present, and about the fears, and about the racial tensions, and about the religious and social tensions, and all those things. And it was so mind-blowing for me to see. And I was like, well, why are we so afraid in the ballet world to do that with our traditions? And we shouldn't be. If something is good enough, it will sustain reinterpretations by different points of views and different voices, as long as they are done from the knowledge of the piece and the intention of the piece. Then it doesn't really matter where you want to do with it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Try again, try something different. So I think it's that combination of keeping the traditions alive, but allowing new people to go at it, like we did with Akram's Giselle. Just break it apart and put it back together in a new, completely specific personal way that resonates with migration. At that time, we were looking at the migration from Syria into Europe. And of course, that could also absorb the storyline of Giselle. And so keep the traditions alive and relevant, commission new works, present the works in new, interesting ways, collaborate with others. Like, from the moment I came here, we started collaborating with all the other arts organizations, especially the Fine Arts Museum. We commission front cloths with local artists. Just get out there and bring other art forms into your art form, so that we cross-pollinize each other and we don't work in silos. And take risks. You're going to fail. I failed a million times. But the worst failure is if you don't try. I think that's the worst thing we can do.
Yeah, I think that's totally the worst thing. And like you say, we just move on if it doesn't work too. You try. I mean, there's thousands of pieces and commissions that we've done that, have been lovely, but maybe have not fit for this time, or, whatever it may be. And then you just move on. So why not take the risk, like you say?
Yeah. I mean, there's a financial risk that you have to be realistic
right.
about.
Of course.
I can hear my board going, what do you mean? But still,
yeah.
You also, actually, there's also a true risk about repeating yourself endlessly. People will come to Swan Lake, and maybe you have a box office of 90%, and then you do it the next year and you have a box office of 80%, and then you do it at third year and you have a box office of 60%. So be realistic as well, that there's a spiral of cannibalism if you just repeat yourself to oblivion.
Totally. And relating to these new works and things, both myself and Sassy grew up largely in Los Angeles,
Wow.
a place that's endlessly creative, but ballet is just, and live theater is not a thing. It's not part of the everyday culture. So I never saw ballet. I went and drove 1 hour to see maybe the Kirov 2 times a year, which was my exposure to ballet. So it was the Kirov or Stuttgart or a couple other places that went. And so you've spoken about and wanting to have more work in Los Angeles. So I'm curious, why do you think ballet hasn't historically been something people seek out in a city so driven by creation? And how do you hope to work, your San Francisco ballet and how it might change, not just in San Francisco, but how ballet could maybe show up on the West Coast more broadly?
It's a good question. It's one that I have asked many people from LA, and
So
so
odd.
maybe you can actually help
It's
me.
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely talk more about it because I find it so bizarre, and have so many connections in LA and talk to so many of the people, that obviously want dance to be alive there, but it is such a curious thing that it's not. There's space, there's money, there's curiosity, there's lots of beauty, there's great weather. You could do it outside. It's weird.
It
I
is
haven't
very
figured it out.
interesting.
I agree. But I mean, we are trying. We're in conversations with venues to have more presence. This year we were there in the Hollywood Bowl, and then we went
Great.
to OC, to Orange County, to Segerston for the performing arts. So we continue to have conversations with those venues and with the LA Symphony to collaborate for the Hollywood Bowl. We have another conversation with another venue that we cannot announce yet to have a long-term partnerships. We
Great.
want to develop long-term partnerships. We want to go
Yeah.
back over and over and over so that the audience gets to know us and again gets to trust us, and then we become a feature that at least once a year we could be there.
Yeah,
So that's
like a
where
residency.
that's where we are
Yeah.
at the moment, developing those relationships. But we're also looking at different, and this is going to sound very corporate, but different products. And what I mean is like sometimes company have a self-perception, like we are this, and this means that 100 people have to travel whenever we tour, and we have to present a piece of work that is this big. And what I've learned at English National Ballet, both as a dancer and as a manager, is that within that framework, you can be adaptable. You can also be something that only requires 40 dancers for a venue that is smaller and is a boutique experience, or is a more contemporary audience. Like English National Ballet perform at Saldes Wells, very contemporary, challenging works. And then he performs at the Coliseum, the classical tradition. And then he performed at the Royal Albert Hall, Swan Lake in the Round, which was like a festival. Like it was a completely different experience. And then we tour big and we tour small. And so we can also be many things while still being ourselves. And this is what we're also exploring now. It's like, okay, so traditionally we haven't gone to this venue because it's too small for us. Well, but now we have all these new creations. And we are actually also, the way I commission is that part of the commission is that it has to be tourable. The designs have to be able to tour in one track.
That's so great.
So again, from the beginning, from the moment of conception of any piece, you have to be able to put that in one track and take it somewhere on the road and be economically feasible for these venues who are also very often not publicly subsidized. And so how do you become attractive to a bigger range of venues? And yet you can go to Orange County and do Frankenstein, and then perhaps in LA you do something much more boutique in a different venue. And then perhaps we also can go to Santa Ana, and we can go, down the coast and up the coast with different things, programs for kids, programs that are tailored for a different audience. And so that's also part of being flexible within what your own perception of what you are and who you are.
Yeah, I think everything you say you're very incredible, and I really admire you, and I really admire your vision, because I think that's the exact way to keep thinking, to keep this art form, this beautiful art form that we all love and are all passionate about, just alive, and be able to make it adaptable, like you say, but still being ourselves, and still keeping the tradition when appropriate in most of the ways. Speaking of ballets, what story would you love to see told on stage? Do you have any that you've
I have a few, but I
dreamt
can't
of?
tell you because I'm trying to get them done.
Of course you are. Wouldn't expect anything less.
Nah, there's so many though. Like, oh my God, there's great stories all the time. Like I have I think one of the most challenging things about working with me is how many ideas I have. I am very, very aware of what a pain it must be for some of my team when I go, I have an idea, and they all go, oh my God, what the hell?
No.
So I think that almost, okay, I'm going to give you one thing though. I read for the Mere Mortals, we collaborated with a great historian, a British historian, Natalie Hines. She's a comedian, stand-up comedian, and she talks about Greek mythology mainly, and Greek art and Greek. And she once described Greek theater, which in fact is the basis of all Western civilization theater, as according to Homer, it had to be linear in time and place, i.e., if all the action had to go forward in time and place. You couldn't go, according to Homer, go down a path and they go, oh, by the way, 100 years ago, something else happened. You cannot do that. And I realized that that applies to ballet. It's really, really hard if you try to tell a story and then go back in the past or go to a different location within that scene. Like, again, you cannot in ballet, while you're doing something said, and at the same time over there, there's something else happening. You have to be in place and time linearly. So whenever considering stories, there are exceptions. For example, the Romeo and Juliet of Nureyev does have a moment where you see what's happening before or after, like the poison scene. But it's very skillful. You have to do it very carefully, and it has to be very specific and small. So I would say, whenever considering a story for a ballet, look at it from the point of view of Homer's rules for theater, for Greek theater. Is it continuous in place and time? And will therefore the audience be able to follow it without you having to write a whole book of explanation that they need to read beforehand, or before having to stop the scene to try and go back and then go forward again?
Wow, absolutely. I mean, and also the Greek mythologies, it's so fun to dive
Endless,
into. It's endless. There's
endless.
just so much. It's so
And it's all
incredible.
about humanity, because
Yeah.
thankfully for us, the Greeks did the opposite to the Christians. They made their gods an image of humanity. The gods have all the sins and all the desires of human people. So they're very
Yeah.
attractive characters to
Yeah.
actually play with, because they're very
Yeah,
complicated,
totally.
constantly fighting
Totally.
and constantly stealing things from each other and taking vengeance, So
It's so
it's,
exciting.
yeah.
Okay, a super last question. I know you have to go, but we just want to ask one more thing. I know this is a big one too, but if there's one piece of advice that you could give to young dancers starting their journey, what would it be?
Know the art form. I know that when you're training, you're so focused on your task and on your skill set, and that's necessary. Like I said before, we are a trade, and that has to be learned by practice. So I understand that takes a lot of time and mental and physical and emotional energy. At the same time, know the art form so that you have perspective and that you don't feel trapped or you don't feel drowning because you think, this is the one place I want to belong to. And that doesn't happen. Because when you look back in history, so many great artists didn't succeed in their first trial, and they became very successful because of that failure. And also, some of those institutions that looked like the center of the universe ended up being quite dead inside once you go in there. And we've seen, that some of the best evolutions of our art form had happened in very small institutions, like the Ballet Russe de Diaghilev, that literally did not exist other than during the periods that they existed. So I think that sometimes knowing things like that, knowing other people's journeys, knowing the history of the art form, knowing the wide variety of options for a career that do exist, will take some of that necessary pressure so that you can continue to focus on your trade, but without the fear or the anguish or the trying to fit in a mold because you think, I need to go and join New York City Ballet because I studied there. Great. But hey, what about Miami, or what about other places? And actually your skill sets is great for foresight. So actually a company that does foresight in Europe might be the right for you. So just it will give you, I think, a broader perspective of the options that are out there. And perhaps you want to study ballet, but then you want to do like Saskia and write books. It's, the journey is the life. The journey is life. Life is important. And if being a ballet dancer is part of your life and you want that and you are able to achieve that, that's great. But there's many ways of achieving that. And there's also ways of using the learning journey of that to achieve things that you didn't think you wanted. And that might bring a lot more joy and satisfaction to your life.
Wow, I think that's an incredible piece of advice to our young dancers listening. I'm so inspired by you, and I'm just absolutely in awe, and I'm so grateful that you came and spoke to us, and I just want to say thank you so much for being on our podcast. We're so lucky to have this conversation with you and have others listen to your knowledge and your wisdom and your courage and all of your bravery. You're so brave, and I'm so admirative of that because we need more of that.
Oh, well, you two ladies are very brave too. So it's been a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you for having me. Really, it's an honor.
Thank you so much, Tamara.
Thank you. And thank you for the work you do. It's very important.
Oh,
Thank you for listening to the Grace Informed podcast. This episode was produced by Indiana Woodward, Megan Elsie McNally, and me, Saskia Gregson-Williams. If you're really loving the show, it would be wonderful if you take a moment to rate and review us. It helps other ballet lovers find our pod and lets us bring you even more episodes. And of course, don't forget to subscribe.
have thoughts, questions, or topics you'd like us to explore? You can find us on all social media platforms as Grace and Form Studio. Drop us a message. If this episode has got you itching to move, oh, do we have the app for you. Download the Grace and Form app today and start your 7-day free trial. Whether you're a seasoned dancer or just starting out, there are ballet classes and dance-inspired workouts for everyone, no matter the level. Come join our community of dance lovers and experience the joy of movement for yourself. Again, thank you so much for listening, and until next time, take a deep breath in, be gentle with yourself, and always keep moving forward.